Okay, we're back. We're live. 3 o'clock rock. Here with Scott Wilson, AIA architect, past president of the AIA Honolulu, and chair of the AIA's Regional and Urban Design Committee. Wow, what a guy.
Well, thank you for having me, Jay. It's good to be back in your
welcome
new
to the
studio.
show.
I'm loving
You
your
like
new
the studio, yeah.
I love it. It's great. It's nice
You know,
space.
in every architect, there's a space planner.
Nice space.
Maybe in every
Yeah.
space planner, there's an architect. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you broke out your functions perfectly. You know, you have your waiting room, you have your tech room, and your studio. So now you're perfect.
You know, when I was in grade school, maybe junior high school, I told my father I wanted to be an architect. He said, be a lawyer. So I did that.
Yeah.
But if I had another chance at it, Scott,
And
I'll tell you the
your
truth.
income is suitably higher because of it.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Well, we're here today to talk with Scott about architectural aspirations in Hawaii. That's the title of our little show. And that means, architectural concepts that we ought to take a look at here, concepts that revolve around energy and sustainability, concepts that revolve around aesthetics and the satisfaction of human needs, human aesthetic needs. I think it's really important. And I've noticed, even before we spoke about this show, Scott, that there's been, I get a lot of email from all over the place. I see a lot of stuff online. And there have been some fabulous pictures of projects all around the world where the building blocks don't go straight up. They go to the side, they're angled. It's almost like anything you can imagine you can do with modern engineering and architecture. And so the world is on a roll here. Last time we talked about public spaces, that's an important global movement, if you will. But then this new aesthetic, that's also an important global movement. And it improves the quality of our lives, I think. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, on a very in a very big way, it seems like the world has almost leapfrogged us. It seems I really ascribe a lot of these new creative forms. You see buildings that are just massive curves. There's not a single straight face on them. They're angular. They're curving. They're swooping. They're offset, like you said. The creativity is partly, in fact, because of, I think, the 3D CAD software that everybody has now. I mean, architects can visualize forms that we never could even dream of in the past. They can do walkthroughs inside and outside, flyovers, and they can mold, volumes in incredible ways. And someone like Frank Gehry is the guy that we know of in America, and he's brilliant. There's no question that he could only do that because he's using this aircraft software that he got from aircraft manufacturers. But when I look at some projects that are over in unusual places like Azerbaijan or Dubai or even East Europe or Africa, Asia, particularly China, I'm just thinking, wow, American architecture is almost stayed by comparison.
What drives them to do this?
Well, no question. In my opinion, a lot of city leaders want a headline grabber. They want an icon. The way Bilbao built that's been 30 years already. But so many people saw the effect of the Bilbao Museum and what it did for a sleepy little post-industrial city in a remote corner of Spain. And I think particularly cities in China, they are trying to distinguish themselves, and any municipal leader with vision is just thinking, how can I build something that will really grab the attention of the public?
Yeah.
So
And the world,
that's just one thing right there.
Become famous overnight.
I mean, you have developers in like Dubai, going for the tallest building in the world, and there's many times there are owners and developers that they're driven by ego and kind of pride. But it's I think the more creative forms that you see out there, the more it spurs people to do even more creative forms.
I remember one in China somewhere. I don't remember the city. Might be Beijing. Where it was this kind of roller coaster thing. A donut it was.
Yeah.
It was a tech building, as I
That's
recall.
right. It was a Chinese TV building,
Yeah.
Rem Kool House.
That's the one. Yeah,
Fantastic
yeah,
building.
Yeah, fantastic.
Fantastic.
Huge.
Just a
You never saw
stunning.
anything like it.
A folded trapezoid that just cantilevered out, hundreds of feet up in the air. Fantastic. I wish I had a picture. We should. That is a perfect example. Partly too that the engineering on that was incredible, and it was only because of modern computers that engineers could even attempt to engineer that thing to have that huge square hanging at 300 feet up in the air.
Well, you raise another point. I mean, there are certain things. It's a confluence of resources. One you mentioned first, and that is the computer, the CAD drawings. Now you can visualize this and make it happen, at least visually. And two is the engineering. You referred to the engineering. And the engineers have to have their own CAD drawing to make sure that they've got the right materials, the right stresses.
Right.
And some of these buildings that, odd cantilever angles, like that one in China, that has to have materials that will handle the stress.
They said they could not have built that 10 years ago because literally the engineering was so complex that no engineer could have figured it out. But the way it managed to tie its structural members all the way back to the vertical portions was really quite astonishing.
Yeah, it's an astonishing building to look at. The other elements that come to my mind is that you can't build a building like that, which will be in the hundreds of millions, maybe more, maybe billions, to actually build without somebody who will write a check for an innovative project. And that hasn't always been the case. It's only in recent years where a landowner, a developer, a building owner will say, "Go for it, Scott. Let's see what you can do."
Well, I think all the way back to the pyramids, you did have occasionally you had the leaders that wanted a really big and bold project, but I think. Yeah, it's just gotten more and more concentrated. Obviously, now we're getting governments and they have really deep pockets, and they're calling for these
but the government
spectacular,
is the owner.
Spectacular projects, or you get these concentrations of wealth, like in the Middle East, where literally money is just no
what
object.
to do with it.
We will build the tallest building, no questions asked. How much is it?
Yeah.
That's.
And then you mentioned government, and government, I think, it has to be a partner in this too, because if government, say, the equivalent of DPP, Department of Planning and Permitting, is very conservative, they're not going to permit an innovative structure so quickly. They'll drag their feet on it, and you won't get your permit. If you want to build a fantastic building, you really have to have government buy in on it. No?
You've got to. If it's a completely new approach to a building, you're going to have to make a big presentation to your local government and say, we have analyzed this. It won't fall down. It won't burn down. It's not going to crumble in or anything like that. It can be done. Governments are more conservative, like you say, but I think by and large. Like my frustration, I think, in Hawaii is that all of our high-rises kind of look the same. They're either all glass. If they're a luxury high-rise, they tend to be these glass sheath, and if they're sort of a median income, then they tend to be masonry. They tend to be concrete with small windows, and so those are our two typologies that we see, and. You can't totally blame that on government. That's also the public and the developers are just not expecting or asking for something more innovative.
Yeah, and maybe it's cost. I want to build a cheap building. Make me a concrete, concrete edifice building.
Yeah,
and it's really too bad because you give up the space for hundreds of years. The useful life of one of these things is a long time, and it's hard to knock it down. So if you saved money to build an ugly building, you're going to be saddled with that.
And speaking of hundreds of years, we also got to think about the energy, the life cycle energy use, and that's what I'm really disappointed with is that all these new high-rises are coming up. There's very few of them that are really sustainable. They're still not using ventilation, natural daylighting. These things are just pushed out of the question. It's covered in glass, it's air conditioned 24/7, and what is that saying long term for our planet? You know, we've got a great climate, and in the old days we wouldn't dream of air conditioning every space, and so that's why I sent you some pictures, because I think in Asia and even in Europe they're a lot more savvy about energy use, and really going, even with their high-rise projects, they're going more natural ventilation and more natural lighting.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in detail. I want to go through your pictures. I want to talk about, you know, the bag of tricks the architect has available to him, and the bag of challenges like energy, sustainability, and you know, the aesthetic taste of the public, whatever that may be. But before we break, I want to add one more factor to my list of factors that make this happen worldwide. Okay, and that is the architect himself, herself. I mean, you can't have any of this without having an architect who has the creative vision to build these funny-looking structures, you know, to take it to the next level. Something, I don't know if you could say it's happened all over the U.S., but it has happened all over the world. Something has happened all over the world to sort of incentivize, to activate our architectural community, our professional architects in the world, that they would come up with this stuff. What is happening? What is it about the profession that has changed in recent years? What has made people think of these fantastic structures?
That is a great question. I think, yeah, architectural education has shifted in the last 20 years, and that's, you know, since I was in school. But I really sense that instead of simply training, you know, young architects to just make these buildings that stand up and meet certain functions and I kind of have fire and safety issues, there is a broader desire to make architecture relevant to world problems, and no longer just simply designed for that wealthy client or that big corporate client. The profession has really had a big falling out in the last 20 years, and we don't have all the standard job security that we used to have, and I really sense that in the architectural schools, they are training you to think broadly in terms of world problems and in climate change, obviously, and you know, people migration, and the fact that we're sort of like a world culture at this point, and so it's okay to think about, you know, Asian influences, even if you're designing something in California. They're freely picking. There's an eclectic design sense now that anything goes, and I think that's just what today's students feel is appropriate, and it's what they want to do, so that after they graduate, they may go off and work in Asia. They may go off and work, you know, in Haiti or Africa. They may go to work for, you know, Skidmore, Owings Merrill in New York too, but they want to have that broad preparation.
This is wonderful.
Yeah,
it's like the
it's
whole
healthy.
Profession has kicked up a level here.
Yeah.
It's a better career, perhaps. Forget the money for a minute. I don't know about the money, but it's a better intellectual experience, a better creative experience, and there's a thing about giving to the community now, in the sense that you can actually achieve a gift to the community, and the architect can.
Yeah.
And when he gives good space to the community, space where you walk through and you feel good, everyone feels good, everybody is stimulated by that space. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling to have created that, isn't it?
Yeah, that public, we call it public interest design, and that's become a huge part of architectural education, that a lot of schools are actually putting that in as part of their program. And others are trying to establish community design centers where the public can go and just meet with architects and solve problems. But it is a lot more satisfying.
One more point before we break, and that is, you said now anything goes, but sometimes anything can be eclectic. I mean, eclecticism isn't necessarily gratifying. And I wonder if there are new rules, I mean, aesthetic rules emerging for the integration of these fantastic buildings with these fantastic forms and shapes, where they sort of cohabit a given area without clashing, without making you feel funny that they're together. Is that so, or is it just any man for on his own?
Well, it's when I say eclectic, I mean like you may use a very non-traditional material. You may use a bamboo, to create a lodge, and it may be, but you may use the bamboo in such a way that it has these sort of massive forms, and it may be appropriate for Los Angeles. So the rules are all up in the air, and obviously our materials are all up in the air. We're not afraid to use, it's not just concrete and steel anymore, or 2x4s. We kind of freely pick from all over the world, and it really is a world stage now. We are, architects are looking to, Chinese architects are looking at the States. We're looking at projects in Europe and Asia, and it is, I think, raising everybody's game.
Yeah, I don't know why, but you make me think of the High Line on the southwest side of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Where you go there and you're surrounded with people who are all enjoying it to the max. They are all having such a good time. The space is relating to them, they're relating to the space. The group is connecting in the space. It is a joyful experience to be there, even for a few minutes. And that's an architectural issue, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe that's what we can do with the rail.
There you go.
Let's forget the train. Let's just make a big old walk out of it. I think and a bike lane. Yeah.
You heard it here on Think Tank.
Yeah.
Forget the train. That's Scott Wilson, architect, past president of the AIA Honolulu, the chair of the Regional and Urban Design Committee of the AIA, here on Community Matters, talking about architectural aspirations in Hawaii. We'll be right back, and we'll see some pictures of what we've been talking about.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hitchell. My show is called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to discuss solutions to global problems on climate change facing people, nations, and the world. Join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Think Tech Hawaii. Aloha and bye-bye.
Aloha, you can join the Hawaii Farmer Series every Thursday from 4 to 5 on Think Tech.
And I'm your co-host Matthew Johnson, here with Justine Espiritu.
And we are so thankful to have this show to use as a forum to get to know all the movers and shakers in agriculture in Hawaii and hear kind of their background and history, as well as
their perspective on what they're doing and also the future for agriculture in Hawaii.
So join us every Thursday. You can tweet in your own comments and suggestions and be a part of the conversation at Think Tech High, and we hope to see you every single Thursday.
Bingo, we're back here on 3 o'clock Rock. Community Matters with Scott Wilson of the AIA. So we have some pictures. Let's see the pictures and flog ourselves for not having this in Honolulu. What is that, Scott?
Oh, there's the vertical forest. Okay, well, Jay, you and I were talking about how could buildings become more sustainable and use less energy. We've got so many high-rises in Honolulu that have air conditioning and they don't use plants, and yet we live in a fantastic growing environment. So shame on us. This building is in Milan, Italy, and not exactly a tropical climate, but this is called the vertical forest, and this architect, whose name is Stefano Boeri, decided he wanted to help clean the air. Obviously the air in Milan is pretty polluted.
It's an industrial
so
city.
he created a forest in a high-rise, and so each of these units has a big old planter. You can see those boxes, those are concrete boxes, and they've got trees, full-on trees. There's something like 900 trees in these two towers. And they're both about 200, one of them's about 350 feet, so it's a typical tower for Honolulu, and the other is about 270. So this is exciting to me.
It really
This-
is. It's
this
beautiful to look at.
Why don't we have this? This is, and can you imagine living in one of those units? It's like living in a
Oh,
forest.
Yeah. It's
Brilliant,
like,
and
it's like
he's
a single-family house that
This
way.
is popular. He's already got a new one coming up in Switzerland too.
Same thing.
Same thing. A winter climate.
But you don't have to be him to design this. Somebody else could
No,
design this.
I know.
the
This
same
should be
way.
an inspiration for developers and architects here in Honolulu, and we could do it even better because it's so easy for us to grow things in buildings. Anybody who's living in a condo knows all you have to do is put out a pot and water it, and pretty soon you've got something growing all over your lanai.
But one thing strikes me, I'd like to point out to you, is that in Europe, my experience is when you see a flower box, there are flowers in it.
Yeah,
And the people who own that flower box are going to really try hard to keep it going.
I know.
In Hawaii, you don't necessarily see that. And I imagine the arrangement in a building like this is that the owner of that unit, or the tenant of that unit, is responsible to put the tree there and maintain the tree, and not let the tree die and shrivel.
Yeah.
So in Europe, I think maybe the custom of it is more focused on making very sure the tree lives. In Hawaii, I would worry about the way you incentivize people to make sure that the
That's
tree
true.
they plant will live.
Yeah. Now this is speaking of another case, this is in Casablanca, Morocco. And now this is not yet built, but this is a project that I think it's called the Amfa Gardens project. But what they did in this case was they used more vines to literally just shroud a building. And again, you're dealing in a very hot climate in Morocco, and they're using plants on these high rises as a way of filtering the sunlight and creating a softer light inside. So again, they're using natural daylight, but instead of putting on Venetian blinds like the way we cover up all of our windows, they're using plants.
Lovely. And you know what? This would be easier to manage than asking people to plant trees.
Right, yeah, because this can be handled by the building.
Yeah, this is a common area. Yeah.
These are some of these are big. They're from the roof on down.
Yeah,
And so they could be handled by a janitor or something.
But it goes for the whole notion of incorporating foliage into a high rise. This
Yeah.
is really an important notion.
It is, and we'll look at some other examples from Singapore. Now this is an example actually from Saigon, from Ho Chi Minh City.
Saigon.
These towers are 22-story towers, and they are connected with a bridge at the top. But what's really important is that they all have a continuous balcony that has bamboo in it. And so what's happening is that the bamboo is like a screen. And you'll see a shot of a typical room like this. So there's your natural Venetian blind. It's a bamboo. It's growing in a continual balcony outside of every room. Isn't that brilliant?
It's lovely.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
And
The
bamboo.
apartment's lovely too, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a fairly straightforward room, but this is a way of allowing natural ventilation and natural light. So Vietnam is a country where they're very concerned about energy use. It's not a wealthy country. They can't afford a lot of electricity.
Yeah.
So this I think is a tremendous example. This is a street view of it. But you can see the fun balcony. They've kind of put some wavy lines in the balconies there.
Yeah.
But that's all continuous bamboo growing in there. And
Changes the image of the building, I find.
and the fun part was that they put those bridges on
Yeah,
top. So that it's just 3 towers basically, and they're pretty generic towers. But they've got bamboo growing, so they've kind of got this nice kind of soft green look to them. They've got a continuous sky bridge at the top, but very low energy. Very sustainable. This is a perfectly analogous climate to Hawaii. This is the kind of climate that we have.
I love the sky bridge. And,
We
years
should be
ago,
doing
that
that.
was not possible.
But
now engineering
that
makes it
project
possible.
alone, we could easily transplant that.
We could.
right to Hawaii as is.
Right. So you could actually take these pictures and get on your CAD program
Yeah.
and do some architectural design.
We could literally copy it, but I mean, I would want to give credit. That was Vo Trong Nha is the name of the architecture firm. They're in Saigon. And I really applaud them for being sustainable with their architecture.
Right, ahead of the crowd.
We need to be inspired. That's what we need more of in Hawaii.
Yeah, it's too bad that Kaka'ako has made a concrete jungle. Sorry, that's what it looks like to me as I drive down the street. And a lot of it I'll never enjoy because I can't afford it. But we could have, and maybe there are places yet. Maybe Kalihi, like Governor Ige says, maybe Kalihi would be a place where we could do this kind of innovative architecture.
Well, even the inland portion of Kaka'ako, you know what? Yeah. What we're only seeing right now in Kaka'ako is the first wave of high-rises along Ala Moana Boulevard. And those have the great views. And so the developers have kind of done their standard luxury condo projects, with the exception of Vida. And Vida project was canceled, I think, really because it tried to be two things at once. It tried to be luxury, and yet it had natural ventilation in some areas, and it had roof gardens. So it sounded more like a people's building, a little more regular folks. But yet the prices were all in the millions.
Oh, got it.
So I think the real well-heeled stayed away and said, this is kind of weird. And then the others couldn't afford it, so it kind of fell through.
Yeah, the market controls.
But if you look at what Howard Hughes is doing at the other end, they're building like crazy.
Yeah.
They can't build fast enough. They were actually running out of tower cranes. That was
and labor too. They were bringing labor in from anywhere and everywhere in order to get the job done. So, you think back in the Mauka side of Kaka'ako, there's still room for innovative buildings?
There's a lot more space. There's many more blocks as you move inland, and there's smaller parcels in there, and something like the project we just saw in Vietnam would be perfect.
Yeah, it would be.
It would capture the trade winds, and it's cheaper.
Open. You can see through it. There's a certain thing about seeing through.
Yeah, and what's really not addressed is that the upfront cost, when you take out the air conditioning and take out all the fancy lighting and so forth, that just drops the whole building cost down. And so it's not only cheaper energy-wise long-term, but it's a lot cheaper upfront.
Yeah, fabulous.
So,
okay, well, there's miles to go before we sleep. Do you have any more photos?
Yes, we do.
Let's see what we got. Let's take a break, organize our photos, and come back for another run of photos, okay? This is Scott Wilson, AIA, past president of the AIA Honolulu, chair of the Regional and Urban Design Committee there, very important committee. And we're talking about architectural aspirations in Hawaii. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen, host of Likeable Science on Think Tech Hawaii. Come join us every Friday at 2 p.m. when I interview interesting scientists about what they do, why they do it, and why we should all care about it. It's a lot of fun to see. And you can learn interesting stuff. You'll hear all kinds of fascinating science, and we know you'll have a great time. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Bingo, 3 o'clock rock. We're back with Scott Wilson, architect, and we have some more photos we're going to look at. So let's line them up and give you a treat.
Oh, yeah, this is actually one of my favorite, Jay. This is the Newton Suites building in Singapore. And you see those big trays in the center?
Yeah.
Those are actually public common rooms, and they're every 4th floor.
Oh, lovely.
And so what's wonderful about this building is that it epitomizes a city. It's got public spaces, it's got private spaces. And that's something that we really need to stress to developers. Sometimes they get locked into this thing where every square foot has to be sellable and billable.
Yeah.
And so they build big condos units and then a little tiny hallway and an elevator lobby, and that's it.
No amenities at all. Yeah.
But this developer in Singapore said, no, in the center I want to have common spaces, and I could put some greenery there. You could see that fun green wall on to the left side, and then individual balconies are on either side. Those are all individual units, but I think what's just absolutely brilliant is that it gives some scale to this building. There's interest. It's not just a boring box of a million units like we see in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Instead, you look at it and you go, whoa, what's going on here? You know, there's a park. There's a vertical park in the center.
It's a vertical city.
It's
a community.
And exactly. And I think there's a picture that we have another picture of like one of the typical common spaces. This is kind of looking up, but those folks are in a little common area. And
They can come and gather with their friends, right?
You
Their
can meet with
neighbors.
your neighbors.
They
You
get
can-
to know your
you can have a
neighbor. How
little
about that?
barbecue.
Yeah.
You know,
Fabulous.
there's no reason why we can't do a better job with our high rises. If we're going to all live in high rises, then let's make them like a real city. Let's have some public spaces. This is an example. Isn't that great?
Oh, that's
you know?
the community.
That's a community
beautiful,
space.
beautiful.
Every fourth floor.
That looks like the High Line in New York.
You know, it's wonderful, and that's kind of variety, and you can see that it translates even on the outside of the building. You look at that building and you say, whoa, there's some variety in that building. You see it on a city scale, and then you also see it on a pedestrian scale, on a up front.
This is the way of the future. People, you know, if I'm an ordinary fellow watching this, I would say, I want that. Why can't they do that here? I want
buy
that right
this.
now.
Yeah, you know, we have the perfect climate for this.
Yeah.
So then you, like you say, you're not putting the responsibility of growing the trees on an individual. This can be, you know, something that the custodian crew does. And yet you can enjoy some nice greenery, you know, and you've got, you know.
That's the operative word, greenery. I mean, pretty much everything you've shown, Scott, has been about green.
Well, you know, it's so ironic that here we are in Hawaii, the place that everything just grows year round, and you look at all these high rises and they are sterile. They're just dry, hard surfaces. A lot of them have balconies, but you know, people are working too hard. People are busy. They can't grow plants. We have to rethink it. Now look at these. These are some really wild projects.
Also green.
Again, these are in China actually, in Guangzhou, and these are not yet built. These are renderings. But again, this is an example of just really fun scale, and look at those designs. They change. The buildings change with each floor. They twist. They have some big balconies and small balconies, but this is getting back to what you were saying about just the creativity of form, and we should be thinking about that. If we're going to go with high rises, then let's get out of these boxes, these glass boxes that we've been seeing so much of.
I think not only is it community, but it's pride. In other words, if I lived in a building like that, and I approached it with a friend, walking down that path, for example, toward the building, I would say, that's my building. Isn't that a knockout?
Yeah.
I would be proud of that building. I'd be proud to live there.
Right near that top, big old lanai up there with all the trees on it. Yeah. I sit up there and have a beer every afternoon or something. Yeah.
And these forms are creative, but if you look at all the architectural product these days around the world, it gets much more creative. I mean, it gets wild with one floor askew on another floor, a whole stack of floors, and then an offset for another stack of floors.
Yeah.
It's really amazing what can be done now and what we could do right here, right now in Kaka'ako or Kalihi.
Yeah.
I hope somebody's listening.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah, we can easily be inspired by just what's happening in Asia alone. I mean, we saw those vertical forest buildings in Italy, and those are inspiring. But there's even more creative things coming out of Asia, and they're low budget. The things I've got some pictures of things coming out of Vietnam, and those things are very humble. They're not expensive to build, and they save on energy. I mean, we talk about affordable housing, and you can have affordable high-rise housing. It's just a matter of You don't put in all this expensive lighting and air conditioning.
Right,
You know,
right.
that's huge.
You should
cost.
talk about that. And what do we got here?
Oh,
Is this another?
This is another one. This is called Stacking Green. This is in Saigon. Again, it's a humble area. What's really clever is this is actually a private house. It looks, at first blush, it looks like it might be a high-rise, but it's actually a private house. It had a very narrow site, and he used trays of plants to form, to actually kind of allow natural light in, filtered natural light, and filtered ventilation. So actually, some of those, there may be 2 or 3 of those trays on one floor. So when you look out from the room, and I think we've got some more shots.
But before we go from this, it strikes me there's a whole new element to what you're talking about, is using this in a single-family residence too.
Yeah, this is a
It's not
single-family
that
residence.
Yeah, not going to break the bank.
This is
It's very
Saigon,
creative.
Stacking Green.
Yeah.
It's just a single-family home. Very fun. He didn't have much land, but he wanted some greenery. So they just put in smaller plants. And these are not bamboo and they're not trees. They're just more like shrubs and things.
We need to learn, but we also need to find ourselves. We have to find our
Here's
own
an
signature.
example.
here.
This is the stairway inside that Stacking Green. So you can see these trays. There's multiple trays per floor, and they allow the light in. They give you some privacy. They let air in and wind and natural light, all in a very pleasant way.
Grow what you want.
Yeah.
Including your
now
food.
this one, there's a fair amount of plants here, and I guess this family is, they have no problem with, keeping all those plants going.
What about inside a bedroom? What inside a room?
Oh, this is a bedroom. Yeah.
Oh, okay, well that's
So yeah, you can
funny. We
see
should
they
have a
have
picture of
sliding
that.
doors. They're obviously, if you have a storm or something, or you can close those doors. But for typical weather like we have in Hawaii, you just roll those doors open, and
You're
you
in
have
the
your
forest.
privacy.
You're in the
You have
forest.
plenty of privacy, but you've got airflow. You've got this nice kind of soft light.
Soft light.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
And that is not expensive construction. This is very simple. Very simple.
Now we're going to look at Bangkok for a minute. We're going to have some shots there. What's
Oh
this?
yeah, this again, getting back to that thing about scale and public spaces. You see how you see a couple of slots there with a big
Same thing, huh?
Those are common spaces, and what's really clever, and so you've got private units on either side. You can see those kind of like 4 strips of balconies. Those are the private units. But those are the common spaces, and that's actually also a ventilation shaft.
Sure.
So that's what cools this whole building. And Bangkok, it's really hot.
Yes, I do.
This does not have air conditioning. They
Really?
have no air conditioning in these units. They have fans on the really hottest days, but they have a natural kind of a chimney effect because they have these big shafts which air can flow through and rise straight up, and it cools the building.
That's what we got to do. We got to find
Yeah.
ways to avoid using a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Air conditioning is tons of energy.
It's expensive up front and it's expensive long term, and it may even be the downfall of the planet.
Yeah.
So we have to think of, and we have to take a moral approach to this. That is it really right to be creating these giant glass boxes that are going to take huge amounts of electricity forever?
Forever. For hundreds and
24/7
hundreds of years.
for the next 100 years. That's
Yeah.
that until we come up with a
And as the planet gets warmer,
yeah.
more air conditioning,
Yeah,
more
it's
energy.
a vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle.
It's very scary.
So you're interested in making sure that all these buildings are energy efficient, and we use all the lessons that we have learned about energy efficiency
Yeah.
and sustainability. What other things come to mind that you would do in designing, or taking these designs and adapting them to Hawaii?
Boy, a lot of these are from Asia are ready to go. I mean,
right.
probably the thing that comes to my mind is the use of gray water too, and rainwater. A lot of these units, they have ways of capturing rainwater and storing them in cisterns under the building. So they then pull on that to water the plants in the building. that's something we've been very negligent about. Water in Hawaii. We've been blessed with a lot of rain, and we just tend to flush everything down the toilet, down the sewer, which, you know, we don't give enough thought to the fact that we burn a huge amount of electricity pumping water, not only good water to drink, but bad water,
Long distances,
all the way,
all
you know,
around,
to
yeah.
Sand Island. You know that, you know, it's kind of a joke when you brush your teeth, it goes into the sink in Hawaii Kai, and then it has to get pumped all the way to Sand Island.
Costs a fortune.
That's a huge expense.
So what we have here and maybe in many cities in the U.S. mainland, we have extravagance because we don't have to spend this kind of money. We can live a smarter life. We can do smarter architecture and engineering. And yet we choose, you know, like keeping up with the Joneses, I expect, out of some weird, you know, peer thing. We want to have the best, and we want to have the most energy consumption,
Yeah.
you know, kind of. And so this extravagance is, then we surprised that it costs us so much.
Yeah.
You know, if you take it at the front end, if you abuse the front end, it disappears at the back end.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we're enhancing our own destruction here with that.
Yeah.
And
And the planet, unfortunately.
And the planet.
That's-
Let's talk about climate change. I mean, how does a good building like these buildings you've been talking about, how does that affect, how does that deal with climate change?
Well, these buildings are way closer to a sort of a zero net energy, and that's really what we have to go to. We can't, given all the other ways in which we use electricity and energy and are building up carbon in our atmosphere, our buildings, we should be going for absolute zero net energy.
Yeah.
And I just think 20 years ago, we just thought, well, as long as we're not impacting our neighbors, you know, we're fine. You know, yes, we're extravagant. Yes, we have a very high standard of living, but, you know, okay, we have a lot of resources. That's the way we used to think. But I think in the last 20 years, we realized, hey, this is not the case. We, in fact, are impacting the entire planet. You know, we're the leading source of carbon in the atmosphere until just, you know, the last 5 years when China has kind of overtaken us. But we have a long way to go. And buildings eat up a gigantic amount of our energy. We tend to talk about cars and trucks and airplanes, but in fact, architects are very well aware that actually of our total energy budget in our whole country, about 30% of it is buildings.
So Hawaii has to redesign its way of looking at buildings, especially high rises.
Yeah.
You have a couple of articles here about the modern thinking over architecture in cityscapes.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that, you know, we're not doing that we need to do that. We need to, so once we agree that high rises are the way to go, and I think we have agreed, you know, to that, a more efficient way for, you know, human beings to gather effectively, then we have to build buildings that will allow the best possible aesthetic and you know, technical use of energy, the best place for living.
Yeah.
And this means a lot of green. It means taking the best things you like about a horizontal scape and building those things into a vertical scape.
Yeah.
We need to do that.
If we can agree now, and I think Honolulu has only come to this in the last few years, that in fact we've got to infill our city because it's just more sustainable. We know that we can't just pave over our whole island, that will be just, you know, the end of us. So now we've agreed that we are actually a true urban center, and I think that's now that we've realized that means basically there's going to be a lot more high rises, and if we're going to have high rises, we've got to do them right. We've got to do them much better. They've got to mirror the city as a whole. I mean, a city as a whole has public spaces and private spaces, and now we need to combine those in interesting ways in our verticals, in our high rises.
So how do you do this? Does this begin with the architects? But does it begin with the public? Does it begin with, who takes the first step on this, Scott?
Yeah, It's partly even in the architecture school. I was talking with the professor Martin Despang up there, and he, for the first time, is teaching a course on people towers, I think he calls it.
I love
something.
it, people towers.
And because I can tell you, when I was in architecture school, we never designed high-rises. High-rises were considered kind of the ultimate and boring, and because they were just, you do one module and then you just repeat it 50 times. And what kind of a design, education is that? So this is I think a good first step, that now the students are really thinking about high-rises in a much more complex way.
So if you were a student, just graduated from architecture school,
Yeah.
and you went to work for a firm or a landowner, and the guy said, build me a value-engineered, hollow tile, concrete building, I don't want any aesthetics at all, what would you say to him? But camera two, go for it.
Yeah, Mr. Developer, I think we can give you a really inexpensive building, but it doesn't have to be the one you're thinking of. But we're going to save money on mechanical controls, and we're going to save money on light fixtures and energy use, and instead we're going to use a lot more natural ventilation, and in fact, it's going to have a novel feature. It's going to have common areas every few floors, and that novelty is actually going to allow you to charge more for the units.
I love it. Okay, every architectural graduate has to be able to, has to be taught to deal with the owner and say those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott Wilson, architect, AIA, past president of the AIA Honolulu, and chair of the Regional and Urban Design Committee of the AIA. Here on Community Matters, we're talking about architectural aspirations in Hawaii, and from your lips to God's ears, okay?
Oh,
Thank you, Scott.
thank you for having me.